September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University. Hundreds of students and supporters wait for Charlie Kirk to speak. The founder of Turning Point USA walks onto the stage, his familiar confident stride, microphone in hand, but this moment will be his last. At just 31 years old, Charlie Kirk's story ended in violence. But what didn't end was the influence he built, the fortune he earned, and the machine he designed outlast him. By the time of his death, Charlie Kirk's net worth was estimated at $12 million. But the question is not only how he made it, it's what that money meant. Was it simply income from years of speaking, podcasting, and leading a nonprofit? Or was it a visible tip of a much larger iceberg, a system of donors, networks, and power that gave him access far beyond his own balance sheet? This is the story of how Charlie Kirk made his money, how he lived and what he had planned for the future, and why his legacy is far bigger than $12 million. Charlie was not born into dynasty wealth, no billion-dollar family trust, no legacy estates in his name. He was born October 14, 1993 in Arlington Heights, Illinois, a suburb outside of Chicago. His mother worked as a mental health counselor, a career that provided stability but not opulence. His father, Robert Kirk, was an architect whose projects included work on New York's Trump Tower. It's a curious detail. One of the most famous towers in the world, later tied to the very political movement Charlie would become a mouthpiece for. But at the time, it was simply his father's job. This was a middle-class household, comfortable, professional, stable, but not elite, not the 1%. And that is what makes the Charlie Kirk story unusual. He was not born into the seat at the millionaire's table. He had to build his way into it. So the question becomes, how does a kid from Prospect Heights go from a suburban high school to commanding millions of dollars in donor money from the age of 25? That answer begins in 2012. 2012 was the year it all began. For most teenagers, this is the year of summer jobs, college applications, maybe freshman dorm rooms, but for Charlie Kirk, it was the year of Turning Point USA. At a youth government event, he met Bill Montgomery, a Tea Party activist decades older, who saw in Charlie something most others overlooked. Montgomery described him as sharp, charismatic, a young man with an unusual drive. Together they launched Turning Point USA. At first, it was nothing more than a small nonprofit with a grand idea to shift culture on college campuses, to fight for what they saw as liberal dominance in education. But here's the first secret of political influence. Ideas don't move without money. Flyers, rallies, staff travel, it all costs money. And where does that money come from? At the Republican National Convention that year, Charlie met Foster Fries, a wealthy financier and philanthropist. Fries became one of the earliest major donors. And just like that, Kirk wasn't just a teenager with ideas, he was a teenager with funding. This was the pattern that would define his career, building connections with the wealthy, translating those connections into funding, and then turning that funding into influence. And influence in turn into more connections, and cycle that with making him rich, both in money and power. Turning Point USA was not built to be small. Charlie Kirk had an advantage over older political leaders. He understood the power of scale. By 2015, Turning Point had expanded to dozens of campuses. By 2018, it had become a national brand. By 2023, it was generating over $80 million a year in revenue. But what's important to understand is how it operated. Turning Point functioned less like a student group and more like a corporation. It had a CEO, a board, regional managers, marketing staff. It hosted national conferences that felt more like concerts than political events. Lights, music, cheering crowds, it was branding, influence, and entertainment wrapped into one. And with that scale came money. IRS filings revealed Charlie Kirk himself was earning a high six-figure salary from Turning Point. Add this to speaking fees, podcast revenue, book sales, and investments, and you begin to see where the $12 million net worth came from. But the real genius of Kirk's model wasn't just his own income. It was in the donors' ecosystem. Wealthy conservative families, the Yulins, the Bradleys, anonymous donors advised funds, poured millions into Turning Point. In return, Kirk delivered what they wanted, a new generation of energized young conservatives. So how did this fortune actually stack together? Let's break it down. Nonprofit compensation. Over a decade, his salary and benefits added millions. Not a billionaire's income, but for a man in his 20s, extraordinary. Media and podcasting. The Charlie Kirk Show, syndicated by Salem Media, reached millions. Ad sponsorships and syndication added another steady income stream. Speaking and engagements. Every Q&A, every keynote, every rally came with a price tag. Universities, megachurches, and conferences paid heavily to bring him in. Books. His titles, Campus Battlefield and The Mega Doctrine, provided royalties with bulk orders through Turning Point channels, boosting sales. Investments. While not public, it's likely some of his money was funneled into real estate or private ventures, standard practice for those moving in elite donor circles. Put together, these streams added up to a man who, by 31, had become a multi-millionaire, not born into wealth, but self-made through influence. Now that's powerful. But here's where the story takes a turn. Most millionaires flaunt it. Social media posts with cars, yachts, vacations. Charlie Kirk did not. His public image was carefully managed, disciplined, focused, and not luxurious. Yet behind the curtain, his life was far from ordinary. Living in Arizona with his wife, Erica Kirk, a former Miss Arizona USA, he had access to comfort, security, and privilege. His travel was constant, mostly for work, but always first class. Conferences in Florida, events in Texas, strategy meetings in Washington. While there were a few public reports of exotic vacations, the lifestyle was not frugal. It was comfortable wealth, upper-class America. The lack of ostentation was strategic. His brand wasn't built on luxury. It wasn't built on mission. And that is what made him effective. He wasn't a celebrity influencer. He was a leader, and leaders in this world had to look focused, not flashy. In 2025, Charlie Kirk was already working on his next big phase, the American Comeback Tour. This was designed to build momentum for the next election cycle, targeting students, churches, and communities across the country. At the same time, Turning Point Faith was expanding, merging politics with religion in a way that could cement influence for years to come. But then, the unthinkable. September 10th, Utah Valley University, a shooting, and suddenly, a life of plans, ambition, and wealth cut short. Yet, even in death, his influence was prepared to continue. His wife, Erica Kirk, stepped in as CEO and chair, fulfilling his reported succession plan. The donors, the staff, the organization, they didn't vanish. The network keeps moving forward. So what do we make of Charlie Kirk's fortune? $12 million is a measurable number. But is that the true measure of his wealth? The real story of Charlie Kirk is not just about the money he earned, but about the network he built. A network funded by billionaires, supported by students, amplified by media, and sustained by controversy. A network designed not to collapse when one man is gone, but to keep moving. Critics call him manipulative. Supporters call him a visionary. Both may be true. But what we cannot deny is this. From a suburban Illinois family, Charlie Kirk built himself into a millionaire figure whose influence stretched across the nation. Charlie Kirk's personal net worth may have been $12 million, but the true measure of his fortune is found in the machine that he built, a machine of influence, donors, and networks that will long outlive him. In a world of the elite, fortunes can fade, but power, real power, is built to last.